Hi, my name is Guy Lawrence and thanks for tuning into my podcast today. If you're enjoying these conversations and you want to check out more of this transformational work, be sure to come back to guylawrence.com.au and join me as we go further down the rabbit hole. Enjoy the show. Peter, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Guy. Thanks for having me here today across the world.
I know. We were just talking off air and I stumbled across you a couple of weeks ago, and I was blown away with the way you spoke, what you shared, and your adventurous side to you, and what you've been on through life. And I was like, oh, I really hope Peter comes on the show. And I reached out, and here you are. So thank you. That's the first thing I want to say. I greatly appreciate it, mate. And
Thank
I want
you.
to I want to ask you as well, and I ask everyone on the show when I start. And let's say you were on an airplane and you sat next to a complete stranger right now, and they asked you what you did for a living these days. How would you answer that?
Ooh, good question. I would say I begin gently and say that I'm a writer. I'm a full-time writer. I'm a working writer. Been a working writer for most of my life, and that I am a near-death experiencer. I jump right to it. I'm a near-death experiencer, and my life has been framed by dying, and that's what I would probably do.
Wow.
If there was any sort of receptivity, we'd go in that direction. If not, if they continued to talk to me, we would engage in other conversations and have a really great time.
Yeah,
But I
fair
think
enough. How does it get recepted? Like if that does
uh,
happen, is it 50-50, or are people really curious, or are they dismissive to it?
well, it's I feel people. Part of
Hmm.
my after effects is I sense people, and so I don't. If I'm sitting next to somebody who is uh, well, radiating anger, I might take a different approach. I might like talk about something nice. Or, if I'm sitting next to somebody who doesn't want to talk at all, okay, I don't do anything. But mostly it's a probably 60-40, 70-30. Everybody's curious about dying. Everybody wants to know death because everybody knows death is coming for them. And so people are curious, and if it depends on the person, I might even say I was ordained a reverend, because that might open a door that wouldn't open otherwise. If that seemed like not the good idea, I wouldn't ever mention it.
Yeah, fair enough. And it is a topic that we'll dive into today, I have no doubt. And what was clear to me is that you are an adventurer at heart. And it was an adventure of a lifetime that blew my mind when I was listening to you speak. So I thought that would be a great place to start, going back there all the way to the point of I know you were ice climbing at the time, but let's start even. Why would you? At what stage in life were you? How old? And why even ice climb in the first place? I mean, I've never tried that. That sounds scary.
Well, it's a challenge of mental focus. And the whole trick to climbing is being exactly present where you are and paying attention with all of your senses to exactly what you're doing. And that kind of thing is up my alley. It's my kind of thing. So I was ice climbing because I was a Boy Scout growing up. I live in the northeast of the United States, lots of snow. Uh, Grew up winter camping, graduated to backpacking on my own, graduated to winter backpacking, backcountry skiing, National Ski
Wow.
Patrol, outdoor adventurer, um, outdoor guy, winter guy, pond hockey, that kind of stuff. So I was in Montana, I'm from the eastern United States, and Montana is in the western United States, and I was there escaping a couple thousand miles away, escaping family. I
Oh,
was 21 years old, and we had my sister, my eldest sister, had run away, but from our point of view and my mother's wound, she'd vanished, and she did vanish, and my dad had anger around it, and my mom was broken, and so I escaped. This began when I was 14, and by the time I was 21, I had to get out, and so
wow.
I went on student exchange from my university to this other university, and I backpacked and I climbed and I skied, and I was on the ski patrols in the Rocky Mountains in the United States, and great snow, for I know, like the best skiing snow there is.
Wow.
And so come spring break, I didn't want to go back to Boston. And so I looked for an adventure, and I went to the outdoor club where I had gone on trips and been a leader, and found a guy who was going into Canada, into British Columbia, to backcountry snow cave for a week, capped off by a day of ice climbing on a world famous ice climb. I've been a rock climber. I'd climbed faces, and I wasn't an expert, but I was a natural mountain goat. So outdoor adventure of this kind was not off my list. And but I'd never ice climbed before. But my partner Tim had just become a certified lead climber. So he had his official certification, and that's what gave me confidence in his ability. And he had ability. And I made a mistake in my bravado to make the climb with one ice axe and an ice hammer, which is significantly shorter. An ice hammer is about this long. An axe is about, you can't even see it. It's so big, it's off camera.
Like 4 times the length kind of thing.
Oh, easily. And the idea with 2 ice axes is that you put one in on the pick, you drop the pointy end into the ice, and it creates a hypotenuse of ice and a right angle, and becomes this very stable environment through which a hole is drilled a third of the way up the shaft, and a nylon piece of webbing is woven in. You can put your wrist through it, pull down a bead on the webbing, and when you plant your axe, you can let go and just hang on your wide hand. So instead of having to do this, you're just basically relaxed with your thumb and but the hammers, you can't do that. So there's no resting with the hammer. It's much shorter. The piece that it's supposed to put screws in and take screws out and chip the ice. That's its job.
Right.
But you can climb with it.
So you're on let me get this right, because you're on a cliff face.
Yes.
That's covered in ice, basically.
Oh, yes.
Right.
I jumped to the equipment, but it's a 10,000-foot mountain. I'll set a scene for you. It's a 10,000-foot mountain on the Icefields Parkway, which that's the name of the road, in north of Banff in Canada, a day's drive from the Arctic Circle. And there's 10 feet of snow on the ground, and it's March. And when we arrive at this ice wall, we only go up 500-600 feet. It's 10,000 feet above this, okay? So the climb isn't that high. It's a world famous climb. There's a bunch of teams there when we get there. There's a parking lot, like 70 yards. I don't know how many. I'll say a kilometer. Just say a kilometer. It's less than that, but less than a kilometer away is the parking lot, half a kilometer. And so it's right next to the highway, right next to the parkway. Bunch of teams get there. We walk in. We're the last team in. We look up. There's a sheer wall of ice. We know our destination. There are like routes. People know which routes to go, and so we got on the ice last, and we began this climb. Oh, and one of the things I rarely mention, but I'll tell you because it's as we were standing there, we get to the climb. There's a bunch of teams climbing, and a guy falls like right in front of us. I don't know what happened. He's roped in, right? So he's not going to hit the ground.
Okay.
But he lets go, and he's roped in, and he goes like all the length of the rope it's double the length, because you get this pinpoint. So he goes, it's double the length, and he's bouncing, and now my adrenaline's like whoosh, and but he shouts, "I'm okay." Everybody on the whole cliff holds their breath. Everybody, like everything stops. The birds don't even sing, and so. But he's okay, and then we begin our climb, and because of this axe and this hammer thing, I'm slow because I can't rest, and so I have to grip half the time with one arm or the other. So I can switch back and forth on occasion when I'm in a certain position where I can do that. But basically, you always need 3 points of contact on the face.
And how long are you expected to? Sorry to interrupt. To get up there and back. Like, how long does that time take?
Oh, we should have. So it's winter time. It's March. So it's coming up on the spring equinox, and so it's by sunset. I'll tell you this: by sunset, all the other teams were on the ground walking out. Right. They'd already completed the climb, made the descent, packed their gear, and were walking out. And we weren't. We were sitting on the top looking down at them.
Wow. And did they know you were at the top at the time, do you
They did. We
think?
waved. We're like, you know, they
Surely they
didn't.
must have been thinking, you
Well,
know,
they must have been. I would have. What about those guys? What's up with
yes.
them? Yeah. So the
Wow.
backstory to this is the night before. The night before, we drove up to this town north of the climb, and we bought a bunch of food. And on the way back, it was too dark to set up our tent and find the campsite. So we stopped at the warden's cabin, and we bribed him with a free dinner to let us sleep in the cabin overnight. So we arrive late, we cook him dinner, we sleep in the cabin, we get up in the morning, we sign into the log, the wilderness log, because everybody who goes in the wilderness signs into the log. This is who I am, this is where I'm going, today's the date, this is when they expect me out. So we did that, and off to the climb we went. He comes into the story in a little bit. So we're sitting on the top of the ice, and we're looking down, and the sun sets, and the temperature drops 30 degrees, like that.
Holy
And
shit.
we're only dressed for, I mean, I'm sweating. Okay, I was sweating when I was coming up, and it wasn't super high tech gear. I had one piece of high tech gear. It was my brand new technology polypropylene, and the rest I was wearing wool and an overcoat that was sprayed with silicone as a waterproof, and a hood and a helmet and gloves, leather chap gloves with rag wool mittens, which were perfect for the climb, but didn't really help me after that. So we're at the top of the climb, and my partner, he hauls up the rope. It's a double rope, so it's twice the length. So he hauls up this rope, and it becomes this huge knot, because now we're kind of, we're like, oh my god, 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 we're in trouble. We know we're in trouble. So he hauls up this thing, and he doesn't lay it right, and it becomes this huge knot. And then now the sun has set, and the stars are out, so it's gray light, so you can see in the starlight, because there's 10 million stars. There's more stars than I've ever seen
Wow.
in my life anywhere, and they're all these different colors, and the whole sky is filled with them. So we could see, and but the rope was a knot, and I had to take off my chaps, my gloves, and untangle this rope. Meanwhile, the first stage of hypothermia set in, and I started shivering, like uncontrollably shivering, with my jaw clattering, cluck, 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 cluck. And Tim was like that too. He's sitting right next to me, same deal. And we're both level-headed people. We're both, one of the reasons why we chose each other for this trip is that neither of us panic. We're like right where we are, full attention, push away emotion, for survival's sake. That's where we're at. And so I get the rope untangled, but it takes me an hour to do that in the dark,
Wow.
no gloves, frostbite starts to set in. And so in the meanwhile, we talk about, what are we going to do? And we're kind of up against this face, this, 9,000 feet of mountain above us. And there's this wall behind us, and we discuss, like, canoodling. Do you know that word, canoodle?
Mm-hmm.
We're canoodling. We discussed canoodling up against the rock face, but our insulation was gone. We were freezing, and we were wet on the inside. And we had no food and no fire and no water.
And how far down did you have to go to get back down?
500 or 600 feet.
Oh, wow.
And it's down.
Straight down, like
And
steep,
there's
like.
no trail. So
Wow.
it's either stay where you are. We discussed this. Should we stay where we are? Because the rule in wilderness is that if you're in the wilderness and you're in trouble, you stay right where you are. You don't go wandering off, because that is the way you're going to die. But in this case, staying where we were was going to be definitely death. And we decided that we were going to die. We're going to die if we stay here. So maybe we won't die if we get off this thing. And so we decided to get off this thing. And so all of this takes place while we're untangling the knot. And so then we stand up and we take the road. Now we've got like this much path.
It's like a foot.
Yeah. And so we rope up with each other. We're on ice. We have crampons on, which are these These pokey things, there's two comes out the toe, and then there's a group of them underneath the foot. So you can put the toe into the ice. And so we're standing on crampons on ice, very sure-footed as a result. And Tim ties the rope to himself. I tie the rope to myself. We're, I don't know, 20 feet apart. We have all our gear. We have all our clanking, dangling ice screws and carabiners, and we traverse across to this spruce tree, pine tree. I don't know, some fir maybe, but it was like 8 inches, and it's the rappel. So this is, you're supposed to take a piece of this called nylon webbing. It's this long loop tied in a square knot, like that, and you wrap it around the tree like that, and then you take the rope and you tuck it through the, and then you throw the rope over and you descend. But one of the things that happens with hypothermia is your cognitive function begins to fail. And so we decided between the two of us that webbing costs money, and you would lose your webbing. Everybody who does this loses their webbing because they leave it behind. So we decide not to do that. We throw the rope around the tree, we descend, and it's a rappel, like, you know, like this, dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun, 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 until we get to this bottom end where it's like this.
So you're free falling then, kind of away from
Right.
the edge of the face. Wow.
Right. And so we get to the bottom, and we're in about 4 or 5 feet of snow, up to like our knees. I guess not 4 or 5 feet, but like, just over the top of the knees. And it's kind of soft, so we're stomping around, and we pull the rope, and it's frozen to the tree because the rope's wet. The rope was wet when we put it on the tree, and it froze to the tree. And now we can't get it off the tree. And with both of our weight pulling on the rope, the two of us, meanwhile, the moon comes up like a 3/4 moon, so now we see better, but we can't get it free. And so now we're like, and meanwhile, we're beginning to stumble, and we made this decision not even to talk to each other unless we absolutely had to, because speaking drained our energy. So only essential language, only essential movement, and only essential language, which was hard because we were falling. Because you're in the snow, my coordination's going, and so I fall over, so I'm burning all this energy. And so finally, Tim says, I know this, it's called a hitch. A hitch is a type of knot, and it's a friction-based. So you can tie this, you tie this Persic hitch around the rope with this very thin cord that was part of our gear. We carried a lot of thin cord. And you're able to make a big, huge loop with this down to your foot. So the hitch goes at your hand level, the loop goes at your foot level, and you tie 2 of these, one on either side of the rope. And I took the big rope and I wrapped it around my waist, and I rolled in the snow, and I made it taut so Tim could ascend up this overhang, this free fall, to climb back up without protection to get the rope free. So he begins to go up and maybe gets up 10 or 15 feet, and the rope comes free, and he falls, and I roll out of the way. He yells, falling, I get out of the way, he's not hurt. So now we're standing up, we have the rope, we've got another traverse, and meanwhile, a car comes down the highway and pulls into the parking lot. And I don't even know what time it is. It's middle of the night, and it flashes its lights at us, and we jump up and down and we wave our arms, and it flashes its light.
How far the car is away from you?
Oh, it's a quarter. Well, I said a half a kilometer, but it's probably less than that. In American, I would say 70 yards. I'm not sure.
It's close.
So it's close. It's like a football. I'll say a soccer field, a football field.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's like that far away. It's close. We could see the river, and we could see the highway. Nobody could see us where we were.
It's below you though, still.
It's
right?
way below us.
Yeah. Wow.
And so he flashes his lights. We jump up and down, and we were like, "It's the warden. We signed into the book. We didn't sign out. He's come to look for us." So we're like, "Oh yeah," and we make our next traverse, and now we move off the ice onto the rock. Because it's winter, but not everything gets ice covered. That's just the way it works. So we're in the rock, and there's a pin in the mountain with a ring, and we put the rope through this pin, and we rappel down this craggy sort of rough space that has an angle to it, and we come around the angle at the bottom of the rappel, and we stand on a ledge. So Tim's here, and I'm here, and there are iron pins with rings and permanent straps with carabiners. So he clips in over here, and I clip in over here. Now we're safe on a ledge over the edge. And I tie one end, it's called the bitter end. I tie the bitter end of the rope to my harness, and I toss off the other bitter end to pull it through. And as I toss it off, Tim says, the warden's flashing his lights, he's leaving. So he flashes his lights, we wave to him, we got one rappel left. He thinks we're safe, we think we're safe. But as soon as I toss the rope off and he pulls away and I yank on the rope, it's stuck. It's like the very first pull, there's some kind of V up there and the rope just jammed like on the very, like 3 inches, and boom. Now it's, no matter how much force I put on the line, and you can't push a rope, so I can't loosen it. I can, and because the angle, I couldn't snap the rope. You know, you snap a rope, you pop it out. Well, the rope was touching the mountain beyond my reach. And so there's no snap in the rope. And so, and now we are in serious trouble. We're, you know, my feet were like the ice blocks that you buy in the store. That's what they felt like to me. I couldn't couldn't feel my feet except for that they hurt. I couldn't do anything. I could stand on them, and the boots were rigid, so I didn't have to bend my toes because they wouldn't have bent. And I got frostbite in my nose and my chin and my fingers, and it was at this point I'm pulling on the rope and pulling on the rope, and I'm talking to Tim, but I can't get the rope, and he can't help because our hands are frozen. If I untie the rope, we could drop it. If he's gonna pull it with me because it's not long enough to tie to him, and he can't reach it where it is, so it's my job, and I can't get it loose. And I get to this point where I'm like, oh well, I guess this is it. I can't get I'm so far. So because I was in the ski patrol, so not part of I was a first trained responder on the mountain, and so part of my job in the National Ski Patrol is to know about the stages of hypothermia and frostbite. That's what I did, and so I knew where I was, and I kept him informed of what was. I was the first aid person on the trip. That was my job, right? And so I kept him informed of what's going on, and then I got hot, and when I got hot, I unzipped my coat, which is what people do when they have hypothermia. They take off their clothes. I didn't take off all my clothes, but I did open my coat. I couldn't get my clothes off because I felt so hot, even though I was not. And I was thinking about, I was like, this is it, you know? I know. He said, don't open your coat. I'm like, I'm opening my coat. I'm hot. He said, you know you're not supposed to. I'm like, I know I'm not supposed to. I'm opening my coat. And I could see all the stars and the moon. I started thinking about my family, and I started thinking about God, and I kept pulling on the rope. I'm looking inside my head when I'm looking away back into the past. And so I began to fall asleep. And
were you scared at that point, or was it just?
I was terrified all night. I was in such terror all night that I found I had a superpower of will. So it was like the will to survive grew out of my fear of death. And up until that point, I was terrified. I was level-headed. I did not panic, but I was terrified. And then that just went away.
Wow.
I just wasn't terrified anymore because there was nothing I could do. Nothing I could do would change the situation. And I knew that I had minutes. I knew it was like, okay, I'm at this stage of the game. This is how much time I've got left. I can't get the rope free. I'm going to keep trying. I guess I felt badly for my parents. I was like, you know, they wanted me to come back to Boston. They missed me. I was like, I'm not coming back home. You guys, it's so painful there. And I thought, I guess my parents are going to lose another kid. And so I began to fall asleep, which is the last stage. By the way, hypothermia, other than the parts of you that actually freeze, hypothermia is a quiet way to die. You fall asleep. And so I began to fall asleep, and I would collapse onto the rock and smack and wake up and get up and pull the rope. And I did that a bunch of times. I don't know how many. I wasn't counting. And then I got up this one time, And as I stood up, I got tunnel vision, and it's like the last stage. There's a medical name for it. I can't recall what it is, but basically it's like being on a fade to black on a spotlight. My whole peripheral vision was filled in with darkness and rapidly closed, narrower and narrower and narrower. And I was looking around with this thing, wondering, what am I seeing? I've never seen such a thing. And darkness. And at the moment of darkness, I thought, I'm still conscious. It's dark. I feel like I'm asleep, but I'm not asleep. I'm wide awake. I didn't feel myself collapse. I'm just awake. And then my vision facing the mountain become wide open, only it doesn't see anything. It sees darkness. I see darkness that's this huge expanse, this wide expanse, and I see it because in the far, far, far distance is like a pinprick of light. And this pinprick of light comes rushing toward me at an impossible speed, communicating to me, I'm taking you. And as it came to me, I recognized its immense intelligence and power, and I resisted with all of my willpower that I had, my fear had driven me forward into all night long. I put up this huge wall, and I was like, no, you're not, and like plucked me. And I was like, no resistance. I had no power. I was totally powerless. And this was all power. And it swept me into itself and kind of enveloped me and carried me out and up and off. And this wide, dark expanse narrowed into the proverbial tunnel of my perception. Like I could feel this speed and width, but it was also in the midst of this much wider eternal ocean of darkness. So it was like darkness within darkness. And I got carried up, and suddenly now I don't know what's going on, but I'm content. I'm not afraid. I'm just carried. And but I don't understand. And I pop out into the ocean of darkness that's illuminated. It's illuminated darkness. I can see in every direction all at once, but there's nothing to see except for eternity. And this entity that had carried me was somehow like a concentration of it. And it had vanished, and the whole thing became it. And only it was just this eternal illuminated darkness in which I was content. And I no longer had physical form, no body, no brain, no language, nothing human about me, just like an orb of consciousness. And I felt like I had expanded to my natural size. And I thought, oh, and my thinking was my feeling, was my seeing, was my hearing. There was like no separation between these things.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, this is me. This is me. How did I think that was me? This is me. And then, and I tell this, I gotta take a sip of water here.
Please.
It was, I was this orb of consciousness, and this like portal opened in front of me, but I had no front. Okay. I was like the painting of the 10,000 eyes that sees in all directions at once. Or I was a singular eye seeing in every direction at once. So I didn't really have a front, but this portal, door, gateway, something opened in front of me that was bigger than my expanded size, much bigger. And I could see a tunnel that arced way far into the darkness, another dark tunnel. This one oddly seemed kind of, or maybe I've constructed it in my head as rectangular, but it seemed like they had this long arc to it. And I should say that everything I talk about in this is metaphor, and all of it is timelessness. So everything I talk about in a sequence of events, I made up the sequence of events because it all happened at once, and there's no way that I can construct that. And so I order it in order so that I can comprehend it a bit. And so over this portal was like this flowing cover that was translucent and transparent. Like I could see it and solid. It was like I could see it, see into it, and see through it all at once. And I touched it with my, I felt maybe I heard my name called, but it wasn't the essence. It wasn't Peter. It was like the origin of my beingness. And as I touched this flowingness, I heard my name called, or it called me. It was all sort of at the same time, but it was unpronounceable to me. And all of this living, it was like touching all life. All life was in this flow, and all with capital A, capital L, came rushing into me, infilling me with livingness, with the call of my name. And I could see the origin of my being. I knew that I was creature created, and not Peter created. That's also created, but soul created. Like I could see I could hear and sense the origin of being called into existence. And I could see the pinprick of my own light's origin as just after it came into existence, like a singular photon among 10 bazillion photons of all of the stars of all of the universe.
Wow.
Crushed together, but no black hole, all illumination. And I call it my long tail of my soul, my everlasting soul, my everlasting self, had this incredibly long life. And in it there were these like little tiny perforations of, I couldn't see, or I can't see now, I don't know, and into where they went, but they were other selves of me. But they weren't the whole, they were also like micron thin layers of personality and character. Not the whole, the real of me is the soul of me. And I could see all of this at once. And meanwhile, I then experienced all of the suffering that I'd given away in my life as Peter, from the point of view of the people that I gave it to. Like, so
Wow.
my life review was suffering all the pain I gave away times 10,000. So every little, if you were like my little brother and I wanted to harass you and I snapped you with a towel and I thought, I hurt you a little bit, but really it's 10,000 times more that. And it turns out that every single thing that I did to my friends and family and people I loved, I gave that all to me. I didn't actually just give them the pain. I experienced all of the pain I gave them from their point of view because it was in me.
Wow.
And all of the intentional pain and unintentional pain in like a sequence wave of hell, like the hell of my own making. I constructed this thing and I was suffering in the middle of it. And meanwhile, I also experienced all of the love that had ever been given to me in my entire life, and all of the love I'd ever given away in my life, which was also my treasure. And I could see all of humanity. I could see my sinful nature, put in Christian language. I could see my sinful nature of causing suffering to others. But I also could see that every single human being and more than human beings are part of the superstructure of materialism, that you can't be here without being like that.
Okay.
And whether you're a human being or a squirrel or a black hole consuming a star system, the whole thing is built like this. Everything consumes everything else. Everything hurts everything else. Everything suffers in some way if they have some way to feel pain. And it wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault that caused all this pain, but I couldn't bring it with me. I had to be emptied of it. And so meanwhile, I'm judging myself. I judged myself through all this pain, in with the love that what I carried with me, able to look to the divine love that was outside of me, in which I was in an ocean of, that was saying to me without sound or language, from outside of me and inside of me, I love you, I made you, I know you, you're my creature, you've always been my beloved, I have always loved you, there's nothing about you that was ever hidden from you, I've always known all these terrible things about you, I love you as I made you, this singular photon of love. And all of that stuff was gone. And I was then infilled with this inrush of like that love living thing that flowed into me expanded. And it was this combination of all the things we keep here in fragmentations. So we've got joy and love and beauty and hope and understanding, compassion, knowledge, intelligence, adoration, bliss, paradise, healing, wholeness. It was all this incredible one thing that just expanded me to the edge of my capacity for containment, that it felt like one more cork of it would cause me to explode, to annihilate, to no longer be. And the sweetness of it, I can't even tell you. Times like this is my purpose to be, is to be inside this oneness of being. This is it. This is the thing of all livingness. This is all in my all of who I am. And in the middle of all of this, the voice says, anything you want to know, you can know. And so I want to know all about the universe. I want to know about origin and physics. I want to know everything that there is to know. Astrophysics, everything. And all of it in a one wham download, the whole everything. And I now know that I have access to all knowledge. I'm in the presence of all knowledge. And I say, but I haven't gone through the door yet. Do I have to go? And God says, no language, okay? This is all telepathic, no words. And God says, it's time for you to come home. Come home now. Go through the door. I say, but I've got to, can we talk about this? My parents are suffering. They lost a kid, my sister, and I can't leave them to suffer. And in an instant flash, I'm swept into across heaven to the edge of the universe, our universe, where I can see with God all around me and inside me, all of Earth all at once like a hologram. And I can see every single 7 billion persons on it doing their 7 billion things at the moment that I'm looking. And I could see every single one of them. And I can see that every single one of them is covered by a veil. I can see that every single one of them is beloved. I hear the voice say to me, in the way that I love you now, I have always loved you. All is well, was well, and will be well because of my love, which is a 10 trillion times more than I can possibly explain. It's so much so it healed all of my, I had no suffering. And I couldn't understand suffering, except for when God showed me my parents' faces and showed me their suffering that they would endure in life until they died, were I to die and come home, and showed me that all is well on a much larger scale. And because all is well, they'll go through this, but when they die, like everybody else, they come to me and be infilled with oneness of being and love. But because I saw their suffering, I reasoned that if I go back, I can eliminate some of that suffering for them. So I asked again, and God said, well, yeah, you can go back, but it's time for you to come home. And I said, well, if I go back, can I come back here to this heaven that was this heaven? And God said, yes, you'll come back here. And I said, well, then I choose to live my life. And God says, you won't live your life. And sends me back. And on the way back, I have all these entry points that I can come back into my life. It's like in an instant, I'm on my way. There's 10 million points of entry back into my physical body as Peter that create the path I'm going to make my decisions along to create my future. And in the core of this is like the intensity of the light itself. And I could go into that, or I could go to any of the outer edges further away from it. And I kind of picked a place close to the light, but not in the core of the light. Because I remember thinking, I like my bohemian lifestyle. I don't want to give up all my selfness. And so I was gone down this tunnel, and I got crushed and reduced and smushed and made smaller and stuffed back in my body. I felt like I was being screwed into my body, and then, which I didn't even know what it was. Okay, so I didn't even know what was going on. And so now I'm being all I feel is pain, and now I'm just in pain, and I don't know where I am and what's going on. Where was I, and how come I'm in this thing? And I can't even think. My brain's not even working. and as my body comes back online and I feel more of the pain of all the problems that I have now in my body because of the ice, I finally come enough to, like, I'm being jostled. I feel that motion, and it's Tim. He's like shaking me, and he gets me to stand up after a time, and my brain kind of comes back online again, and he's screaming and yelling, and I don't know what he's saying because I don't understand language, and finally I hear him say, "You were dead. You were dead. If you were dead, I'd be dead." And he's crying, and he's so happy that I'm alive, and he was so scared, and he get me to pull the rope. Rope comes free on the first pull. We descend. We go over to the car. I have enough presence of mind to know that you don't. Tim wanted to hop in the car and turn on the heater and just blast the heat, but you can't do that. You have to bring your temperature up slowly or to kill you. So we pull up the tent. We set up the tent. It's got a chimney and a vent so we can run a stove inside, not asphyxiate. We fire up the stove on the inside. We get in the sleeping bags. We sip tea. We bring our temperatures up. We get in the car hours later. And after sunup, we're warm-ish. And the warden shows up as we are about to get our gear and says, "So are you the boys who were on the mountain last night?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." He said, I came to see if I had to get the helicopter to get your bodies."
Wow.
Like,
That is
and
one
then,
hell of a story.
so I know it took a long time to tell it. And I'm
I was
sorry.
no, I'm just like, holy shit. Because, mate, I gotta ask you though, do you know how long you were dead for in that point?
No idea.
Or?
No, and so Tim and I had a falling out
Oh,
after this. Tim and I had a falling out. I'll fill in a couple of blanks. We got stopped by the Mounties on the way home. We couldn't pay. We refused to pay the ticket in person. They arrested us and locked us in jail till we paid our way out. Then we totaled the car against a semi. I totaled the car against the semi. Tim's car. Tim and I parted ways. I hitchhiked back to Bozeman. I went on this national theater tour, and basically I never saw Tim again. He was so angry at me for wrecking the car, and so the only person I could have asked, I can't find. My publisher, we hunted for him. We paid money to try to find this guy. We couldn't find him, and
wow.
so maybe he'll read the book, is what my publisher said.
I hope so. I truly hope so. It's a shame. Yeah, like listening to that, I mean, like I mentioned before, I've done a plant-based journey with ayahuasca, and also I've had some deep meditative states where I've connected to that oneness and felt that expansion and that exploration. Like, so I can relate to what you're saying, not to that extent of what you went through. Oh my gosh, that is mind-blowing. Well, once you had an experience like that, what do you do with it? Like, what happened?
Yeah, what do you do? That's exactly. So the morning after the car wreck, so we hit the rear wheels of a semi, and we blow the car apart. Neither of us are hurt, but the car is completely totaled. And so we have enough money to. Tim takes a bus back with our cross country skis because we were backcountry skiing. We still have all the gear, and I hitchhike back, and I'm standing on the side of the road. Trying to get back to the United States with my sign at sunup, and suddenly inside of me, I'm like completely confused. I feel like I know that I'm living inside my body. I know that I'm not my body. I know that everybody who looks at me thinks I'm my body. They think I'm a person when I know that I'm not a person, but I don't really know what happened to me. I don't know where I was because there's no way to conceptualize the experience of the oneness of being. Being in the place of no thing. I used to describe this until maybe 10 years ago as being is no thing. I was no thing in the presence of nothing. And when you say you're in the presence of nothing, people are like, well, what about God? So I'm like, no, that's what I'm saying. So I knew that I was no longer myself. And meanwhile, inside of me, the first after effect I had, besides feeling like I was in a cartoon, like I'm living in a cartoon, it was that I have this roaring sound inside of me with no noise, calling my name all the time, telling me to speak, message. And I'm like, but it has no language when it's doing this. It's not like saying message or speak to me. It's wordlessness. And what am I going to do with that? how can I say what can't be said? I don't even understand it myself. And so I went in instantaneous rebellion, and I stayed there for a long time.
Wow. Did you tell anyone?
I kept, no, that's what I'm saying. I decided that morning I was telling nobody. I was telling nobody for the rest of my life. And so that's what I did. I kept it a secret for 20 years, other than my wife and a couple of friends. I kept it a secret. And even I knew, because I knew that when I finally told my wife and my friends, they had no idea what I was talking about. There's no way that I can tell about this. I can only make, so what happened is, long story short, is that I had been meditating before this happened. I'd been 3 years into meditation. I studied centering. I learned centering prayer and some other forms, but mostly centering prayer, which is an American form out of the Trappist monasteries, based in the contemplative tradition, with an influence of Maharishi Mahayogi and TM, Transcendental Meditation, and Sasaki Roshi, the Zen master. And so they formulated this very centering prayer, Zen style meditation that I went to a Catholic high school. I learned it there from the teachers who went to the monastery. And I was adept at it. And so even though I became zip-lipped, I dove into it with all of my pursuit, because I felt like I made a huge mistake. I never should have come back. Not suffering is bliss beyond paradise. Suffering is awful, as we all know. And I gave that up to come back here to help my parents. But I was pissed off at myself as a result, and was angry at God. And so I began my second prayer practice, which was every day saying, God, take me home today. Today is a good day for you to take me home. 30 years, every day. Take me home. Don't want to be here. But I also, that drove me deeper in. And so instead of I graduated as an English major a couple years later. And instead of going into architecture in the family business, as was my graduate school plan, I went to Yale Divinity School to study mysticism, to get my master's of divinity. But it was the pretense to utilize the university's systems in order to study the history of mysticism. And so with the dean of students, the dean of admission, I studied across the university for 3 years in a private study in order to construct language to find my peer group. Turns out all my peer group were dead mystics. Like, I read these people, I'm like, oh yeah, I understand that. I understand this. I understand that. I understand this. I understand that. Not just in the Western classics, but across into Sufism and Hinduism. And it's like this.
Because you had the experience.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all through the literature, the ancient literature. And so what I decided to do was to mine the literature, to create language inside myself, to hang concepts, but to find tools, because none of these people had near-death experiences, and all of them went to the united state of being. And so there are tool sets and I knew about this stuff because I'd read the Transcendentalists, the New England Transcendentalists and the British Romantics, who were exposed to Eastern thought in the when they wrote. So I went hunting, and I read the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedas and the sutras and Tao Te Ching, and I read everything voraciously. And then I went to divinity school, and I read deeply into the literature, and I found tools that I use. And there's a lot of tool sets in the world, but the basic thing is this, and is that breath and mental focus eliminates the false self and allows the true self to be seen. And ayahuasca and psychedelics, I don't know if you've been reading about what's going on at New York University and Johns Hopkins University and the psilocybin. Yeah, right. High doses of hallucinogens can and do create unitive state of beings of non-duality that have the same or similar lasting after effects as near-death experience and other mystical experiences. I just wanted to throw that in there. There's also seems to be levels. Like, there's this guy named Swedenborg who is a Lutheran from like the 1500s in Europe, and he had a mystical experience. He had a near-death experience, and he came back, and he describes it this way. He says that at every level of mystical experience, it feels like the totality of the being itself. This is the highest heaven that there is, because until that layer sheds and you go to the next layer, and it's like that eternally. There's like, until you obliterate back into the oneness of being itself, it's the closer you get, the further it recedes.
But isn't it like that in life as well? Because, you know, as I get older and look back, I think, wow, I'm not the same person that I was then. There's like layers of myself that keep unfolding, providing I don't stagnate and
Right, and
embrace.
you don't sound like you do stagnate.
No, that's right. Yeah, but embrace the change as it comes, you know,
Right.
that move with it. I got to ask you, why did you decide to come out with this
Oh, well,
20 years later?
so the dean of admissions talked me into becoming a Protestant minister.
Okay.
And,
Wow.
I used as my examples Wordsworth and Blake, all these romantic poets who had gone to divinity school and spent their life writing, and they were all transcendentalists. And I thought, okay, I can hide inside the church. I can use the Christian language and continue to pursue my inward journey, which I did with intensity, and I'm still intense about it 40 years later, and work inside the church. So there was this huge embezzlement in the church. We helped solve the crime, and at the end, I got recruited to television. And so I had a TV show in New England, a 2-minute spot on 2 commercial stations in the morning for 2 minutes, telling original devotional stories that were non-sectarian. And so I did that for 15 years, and in the middle of it, I started writing grants. And so I started getting grants from a network in New York City. And when I went to this network in New York City and they started giving me grants to produce a lot of my shows, I told them this story. I had come out by then. At the end of the embezzlement, this is how I came out in the first place. At the end of the embezzlement, the power structure of the church tried to ruin me personally, professionally, financially, socially. They tried to ruin me because I work for God. I really didn't care that they didn't want me to look into this. I knew that there was pain in the church, and I went after it. And I fortunately had some people who went with me, and they tried to ruin me from finding out the $200,000 that had been stolen. And they wanted to sacrifice me. But in the end, we won. There was criminal charges and jail time.
Wow.
And at the end of all of this, it makes statewide news. The deacons come up to me on a Sunday morning and say, "Peter, we're so sorry we treated you that way. You must have had a lot of faith to put up with us." I'm like, I think they know me enough now that I can trust them to tell them that I have no faith. I am not a believer. I have no faith at all. Zero, zippo. I don't believe in any cultures. I don't believe in politics. I don't believe in religions. I don't believe in anything. All of that stuff is all this construct. I only have access to the divine. That's all I want. That's my entire life, is this oneness of being, the pursuit of it, and being in the presence of it, and distributing it. And so I decided and I also have no doubt, God is real, the only reality. And so I decided that Sunday morning that I wouldn't lie to them anymore, because I'd been standing up in the pulpit for 11 years saying that I was a believer, and I wasn't. And so I told them the story from the pulpit for the first time. Blew them all away, and they didn't know what to say. But within days, 6 people in my little coastal town where I live, in the harbor town, came up to me and whispered to me, "Me too." The paramedics brought me back. The doctor brought me back. I died when I was a kid, and I got mouth to mouth. And so then I got recruited to TV, and I did this TV show, and I'm in New York City. They find out about this, and they're like, "You got to write a book." And I'm like, that's really coming out pretty large. It's one thing to come out in my town and kind of hint at it in my state, but it's another thing, my credibility, my reputation. And they said, "Here, we'll make a deal for you. The deal is, we'll produce your book trailer if you write the book, and we'll produce your book trailer now as an incentive." So my book trailer, which is on YouTube, was, I think we shot it in 2013 or 14. and my book didn't come out till 15. I think we shot it in 13.
Oh, wow.
And my book came out when in 15. And I didn't even, you know, I had an agent, I'd already written a book. But so that's how that all happened. And then I did this show in 2015, this TV show in 2015. I had a heart attack and I died the day after running 5K and had a second experience. And around that time, my show got canceled after 15 years. And so
Jesus
that was about
Christ.
2 years ago. And so now, always in the church and on TV, I was always under the constraints of the culture, the Christian church. And I was in a mainline church. I was not in this evangelical, you know, we're first denomination to ordain women and gays. Okay. I hired a gay organist, very progressive. And, but theologically, you know, no connection to the holy in the experiential sort of mystical way. And so now that I'm off TV and I don't have TV constraints and church constraints, I'm exploring my new task. I'm doing counseling for mystics, but I'm exploring on Sunday mornings because I went to divinity school and I know the Bible, the mystical teachings of the Bible. And I think that Jesus was completely misunderstood and that he was a code switcher. And so a code switcher is somebody where I live in Maine. We have people who French is their first language and English is their second language. And so they speak Franglish.
Correct.
With syntax and language of French right next to in the same sentence as syntax and language of English. I think Jesus was a code switcher between metaphor, heaven speak, and Aramaic. And I don't think people grasped that. I think, and so when I came back and I looked at him and I listened to him, he's not the guy they think he was. And he was, and so now, this is what I'm exploring now in my new explorations is that. Because
Wow.
I think that there's a lot to be gleaned out of religious traditions and the mystical aspects of them, if only to give us the language to think about our own experience
For
with
sure.
God directly.
Yeah. It's interesting because I recorded a podcast yesterday that hasn't aired yet. I was only talking then. Because I never grew up around religion. I got to confess, I haven't even read the Bible. Like, it was just my upbringing. So I haven't had any kind of framework. And I'm kind of glad in a way because it's everything that conclusions I've come to have just come from my experiences, but also being open to experiences and not being closed off to it and being shutting things down in any way as well. You know, it's interesting. The other person I thought of when you were saying that, I had, I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, Anita Mojani. I had her on the podcast last year, and she was saying the same thing, that she had very similar experiences to you, and that she was terrified about speaking about it.
Credibility.
Yeah.
Credibility. And I want to say, Guy, that you didn't have to unlearn and unknow things. Yeah. So a religious framework can provide both information and context, but it also provides limitations, and they're pretty serious. And so good for you.
Thank you. And just to ask you this question though, when you've experienced something like that, and because they say the greatest fear is death, right, to people, because it's the unknown, and you've had these experiences twice, and you are now living life, like, do you fear anything now on earth?
I am afraid for my granddaughter when she stands too close to the edge of the cliff and she's not paying attention to the ocean and where she's standing. Okay, so that kind of stuff for sure. I can get anxious about how am I going to pay the mortgage this month? Like, how are we going to do that? Because I'm a worker. But those sort of normal human things are, yeah. But in terms of anything else, no. So especially around death. So in my ministry in the church, I once, this is just an example, I once got a call from the police department and asked me to come to the scene of a hostage with a gun. And they asked me to put on body armor. I got a big body armor shield, and I went into the apartment with these guys, these two cops who I knew, with their pistols drawn over my shoulders. Okay, so like if they fired right in my ears. And so we go up the stairs, and because I'm the only guy that this guy's going to talk to. He's not going to talk to anybody else. He's only going to talk to me. And so I negotiate this thing out. I was not afraid. I just was
Wow.
not. One day I was out, I sail, and I solo sail. So I'm out in this small
Oh, wow.
sailboat. It's like a 21 foot, and I'm out sailing out, and I get outside these islands, and it's blowing outside the islands, but it's not blowing hard inside. And I get around this island, it's blowing a little harder than I thought it was. And so the boat's like, okay, this is too much wind. You got too much sail going up, and it's tossing. And I'm like, my adrenaline starts to rush and my heart starts to beat. And then I think to myself, what's the worst that could happen? I could die. I'm good. I like totally calmed down and just sailed the boat. And so I told my wife, once I told her on the day after we got married what had happened to me, like
Okay.
4 or 5 years later. And then I began to tell her that every day I pray for death. And that was hard in the relationship. But she knew all the way along, I'm not afraid of death. I'm just not afraid of it. Dying can be terrible, but I'm not afraid. And so she knew this about me. Eventually my kids know this about me. And then when my heart attack comes in 2015, I'm in the yoga class, and it's a hot yoga class, and I'm sweating way too much because I just got there and I didn't actually do any exercise. And so I'm lying on the mat and I'm sweating and sweating. Like, I self-diagnose a heart attack. I get up and I leave the room and I go down and I lay in the grass thinking it's going to be okay. Doesn't get okay. It gets worse. And I think to myself, uh-oh, I get to die today. Today's the day. And I'm completely content. And out comes the teacher who says to me, Peter, are you okay? I said, yeah, Romy, I'm dying. I'm having a heart attack. She's like, looks at me. I'm like super fit. And she's like, you're not having it. I'm like, no, Romy, really, I'm having a heart attack. I'm dying right now. And it was like Ganesh standing on my chest, all of the weight. And anyway, that's to answer your question. Even in the face of death, I was not afraid. And so that's a superpower. It's a superpower because I'm just not, I know I'm not from here. I know I'm not from here. I know where I'm from. I know where I'm going. And so my adventurous soul is free to explore and push at the edges. I'm always pushing at the edges. I push at the edges socially, culturally, theologically, mystically, prayerfully. I'm always like, edge is my space. And that's scary for a lot of people. I take calculated risks because I'm a smart guy. I do a lot of research. I'm heavy into research. I'm heavy into controlling the factors, but I take risks. I'm a stilt walker. There's a risk, you know.
As you do.
Right.
Wow, I'm blown away. I can't believe it. I'm blown away. Amazing. What do you think? What do you think of where we're at right now? I'll just ask you a few more questions before we wrap it up. But I'm curious to know: are you hopeful for the future of humanity right now?
I am hopeful for the future of humanity. I mean, we've got a global pandemic that could, you know, the bubonic plague took 10% of the population over centuries. You know, we're going to have antibodies and vaccines in place sooner than that, but we're impacted by this in a serious way. So that's a bad thing. But the good a good thing is that racism is being confronted globally, and oppression and patriarchy and all this other stuff, which has its roots in Christianity, at least in the West, and Australia probably the same as the United States. But overall, on top of all of that, there's this global phenomenon of near-death experience that's being driven by science. And so my take on it is that for the last 50 or 60 years, since the advent of cardiac care and the advancement of technology for what they call resuscitation that's spread globally, there's tens of millions of us all over the world, all having a variety of experiences, levels of experience, all of us coming back with the consciousness knowing that we're not our bodies. That's like the baseline. You die, you leave your body in the OR, you get sucked right back in, you know you're not your body. And so baseline that one. And then from there, there's all these gradations going up. And it seems to me that love is a message that's coming through the majority of us. I'm in that crowd, and I'm looking for the other love messengers, and I've found a lot of us so far. And this is a trans-global, trans-religious experience, much like mysticism is. The unitive state is the Sufis and the yogis and the nuns. But this is the Jains and the Jews and the Muslims and the Sikhs and the Baha'is and the atheists and the agnostics and the shamans. All these people from all these different traditions all over the world are having the same experience. And it's breaking down, I think it's breaking down the social and religious orders of systems. It's beginning to do that because there's so many of us. There's tens of millions of us, and we're all starting to talk to each other. And what's it going to do is this. It's going to give freedom for all the tens of millions of more people who've had mystical experiences that aren't near-death experience. Near-death experience is, by definition, a mystical experience, according to William James, Harvard, 1901 or 2. And it's going to give a lot of freedom for all these other people to come out of the closet.
Yeah, I agree. I've certainly not had a near-death experience, but I've had mystical experiences. And
Yeah.
you know, the one thing that I really realized when afterward is that you really, because you have this huge connection with the oneness, and you have these experiences, when you come back, you really see people. Like you get past all the judgments, the dogma, the religion, whatever it is, the culture, and you really feel people. You see them, and your empathy and compassion just goes through the roof for that, and you connect with people in such a different way. And it's like, I wish everyone could experience that. You know?
Well, I think a lot of people have had a taste of it, and the people like you had, because you've experienced non-duality, and that's a higher level form of mysticism. There are lower level forms of mysticism that millions of people have experienced, and I like to use the example of a visitation from the dead of a beloved one. Probably the most common experience is when, you know, your husband dies and he comes to visit you and communicates to you telepathically immense love. And in that moment, you shift from belief in the afterlife to knowing that your loved one is still alive, and it changes your grief experience. The after effect is that your grief experience changes, because now you're still attached. You're not, is he waiting for me? Does he still love me? You know that he still loves you. You know that he's a living being, but without a body like yours. And that I'll hit the 4 mystical points of mysticism that William James wrote, varieties of religious experience. The first one is it's passive. It happens to you. You don't make it happen. Now you can ingest psychedelic and control that parameter, but the experience itself doesn't happen to you. I mean, you don't make it. You take the drug, but those of us who meditate, we're kind of on the same route. So, but the mystical experience is passive. It happens to you. You don't make it happen. It's transient. It has a beginning and an end. It's noetic. It leaves you with an interior soul knowledge that's just beyond the grasp of your mind, but changes your entire perspective. And it's ineffable. Whenever you talk about it, it sounds stupid. It sounds like all the wind goes out of your sail, all the air is let out of your balloon, and no matter what you say about it, it doesn't quite capture the exact experience. So nobody talks about it in public because it sounds kooky. But lots of people, like, so I did a funeral. One of our young veterans took Ambien, and he shot himself in the head, and he killed himself. And it was a terrible thing. And I knew this kid. He played on my baseball team as a kid, Little League. And so 700 people in the gym. And I asked the family, has Nick come to visit anyone? And I knew that was kind of a controversial thing to ask from the pulpit. But one of the cousins or friends, she says, me, he's come to visit me. And he told me that he's sorry and that he loves us. And she just went on and talked about it. And the entire crowd, everybody there, was eating from the words of her mouth.
Wow.
And so there's power there that is untapped in humanity. And I think that the stacking that I just did, the near-death experience, science-driven spirituality, which is a brand new thing. Science has never driven spirituality before. And near-death experience, I mean, and mystical experiences, including psychedelics, but the more traditional Kundalini awakenings through Vipassana practice or Raja Yoga or all these things. And then there's all this gradation down to this most common experience, and all of them have power, and all of them are unspoken. And it's like this public secret. And so I risked with intent, I risked my reputation coming out as a near-death experiencer, as a professional, as a white-collar professional, but I didn't risk my mystical life. I was afraid to come out as a mystic until I felt like the power of the near-death experience had become so dominant in the culture that it was safe enough. And so I'm going to come out in my next book as a mystic in a way that is different than near-death experience, in the hope that by my coming out, I'll empower other people to speak too. And the more of us that share this, the more of us get brave enough to share it.
Totally.
Because I'm just I'm sorry. What I want to say one last thing, which is that I'm just a cog in the wheel, and it's not about me or you. It's only about the light itself. And I know that you know that because I can see it in your eyes.
Yeah, beautiful. When's your next book coming out?
As soon as I get a new agent, in the middle of my film negotiation, sold my second book rights for a movie, and in the middle of that, I let my agent go, and I'm now waiting I interviewed with a great agency 2 or 3 weeks ago. They have my proposal, so got to get the agent again. But my publisher introduced me to this agency, so we'll see how that all goes.
Awesome.
So hopefully a year.
Awesome. I gotta wrap up the show, but I got one question for you.
Sure thing.
For you. Is there anything you would love to leave our listeners to ponder on after everything we've covered today?
2 things. One, the only way out is in, and God is love, everywhere, all the time. Love is the treasure of life, and the more you give away, the more you get to keep.
Beautiful. And where can they find you, Pete, if they want to find out anything more about you?
Peter Panagore, peterpanagore.love.
.love. Yeah, love it. Peter, look, thank you so much for coming on the show today, mate. That was incredible. And I'd love to have you back on the show sometime in the future if you'd be open to it. There's so much untapped conversation here. It just blows my mind. And just thank you for your open heart and honesty. And I know everyone listening today would have been as blown away as I am by what you just had to share. So thank you.
Thank you, Guy, for having me. I'd love to come back again. I thank you for that too, and thanks a lot for having me. You're easy to talk to.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you. Thanks, mate.